कांग्रेचुलेशन और अब अभिनंदन का अर्थ बदल जाएगा।
बेटर सेंस शुड प्रिवेल। हमें बैठ के बातचीत से अपने मसले हल करने चाहिए।
Hello and welcome to this special edition of The Big Fight. As I've been telling you, we've been spending the last few months really on this particular show, looking ahead at the general election, looking at the options, trying to figure out which party is ahead and which party is behind. We're going to suspend all that right now because obviously there are other things for the nation to worry about. Now on this particular program, over the next 1 hour or so, we have got some of the top strategic thinkers and analysts who are going to be joining us to take a look at the path ahead, the road ahead. And this is, we know that there's been a lot of yelling and screaming in TV studios, trying to really, chase TRPs and do some of the other stuff that I guess television channels have to do. But I think we are going to try and look at some of the realistic options. What are the possibilities? What is it that we should really be trying to do? And there are a number of opportunities and a number of options that are going to be lying ahead of India in the next couple of days. Is there a possibility of further military action? Is there wait and watch? Is that the right path that should be followed? Should there be the resumption of dialogue? Should there be economic sanctions? Should there be renewed and increased pressure on Pakistan? Is it time to de-escalate? There's a lot really to talk about. So let's try and get in a as cerebral a manner, I guess, as we can over the next 1 hour. Let's try and look at some of these options and perhaps emerge with some positive conclusions. So let me start by welcoming all the experts and whom we have with us on the program today, starting with Nirupama Rao. It's a pleasure, ma'am, to have you with us. Former Foreign Secretary, of course, and a leading thinker on all that's happening. I'd just like to introduce some of my other guests before I come back to you, ma'am, and just get your sense of what's happening. Satish Chandra, it's a privilege, sir, to have you with us. You are a former, of course, Deputy National Security Advisor. You've also been High Commissioner to Pakistan, so therefore you have a sense of what really works out there. Maya Mirchandani is, of course, very senior journalist, been looking at foreign affairs for more years than I can count. So Maya, it's great to have you with us. Brigadier Rahul Bhosle, a defense analyst. Uday Bhaskar, somebody who's been one of the top strategic thinkers whom I've encountered. So it's always great to have your wisdom, sir. Major General D.K. Jambal, another defense analyst. Amarjit Dulat, who's head of RAW, knows exactly what's happening in Pakistan, and also been a Kashmir expert, really knows what are the buttons that India could perhaps be pressing to try and get the outcome that I think all of us want. And by the way, that's what this is also going to be a little about, getting what India wants, what India needs, and what India deserves, which is a modicum of peace, the end of terrorism, the end of the deaths that we have been seeing, the ability to grow and to develop and to do the things that are required for the prosperity of the region, for the prosperity of our citizens, for the upliftment of all the 1.7 or 1.8 billion people who live in South Asia without the threat of violence, and certainly not the persistent specter of terror hanging over all of us. How can we achieve that? I think that's really the question we should try and address. Air Marshal Anuj Chopra also joining us, I'm told. So I'm going to be coming to you as well. But if I can just start off with Nirupama Rao, because I know she has to leave us in just a short while from now. Ma'am, you've been Foreign Secretary. You've been also writing at great length about foreign policy and about the path that you think India should take. Guide us. What do you think it is that what is the path that India should be taking? I'm going to put some options down that we've sort of been able to think up, and I'm sure you have better ideas also. What would you do if you were the Prime Minister and you are in power right now?
Well, first of all, I think we have to sift carefully through the sequence of events that we have all witnessed this week. Of course, going back before that, the attack in Pulwama, and the whole national reaction to that. There was a national reaction that really left, I think, the government with little option but to strike back at Pakistan. It was very different from what had happened in 2008 during the Mumbai attacks, when we had suffered a grievous blow, really, to our national security with the attacks on the various places in Mumbai and the 161 people we lost at that time. But at that time, for reasons that obviously had been carefully considered, the government of the time decided not to react. But as the years have gone by and as the tide of terrorism from Pakistan directed against us from Pakistan shows no signs of receding, and the numbers of lives, the death tally has gone up by the year, and what you saw in Uri in September 2016, even before that the attack in Pathankot, and now of course the massacre, the martyrdom literally of the CRPF Jawans in Pulwama. What, you may ask, what other option was there but for India to react? But having done that, having of course established and proved the fact that we are capable of reacting and delivering an attack on Pakistan that they should really sit up and take note of, I think we have raised the threshold. We have crossed a certain quantitative threshold. And I think we should be aware of that, and Pakistan, more than us, should be aware of that, because in the event, God forbid, of a future attack where we lose many lives, there is little option but, to scale up this effort.
And
this is really
that's of course
quite
one of the
a serious
things,
situation.
And that's of course one of the things that happened. The threshold has certainly been raised. India has very clearly signaled that if there's another attack, or if there is an attack, we reserve the right to do anything. So the time we crossed, we didn't just have airstrikes inside Pakistan occupied Kashmir, we struck inside Pakistan proper. If there's to be another terror attack, something else can happen. Yes, the world also seems to have changed a lot from Mumbai and others. Of course, we can keep on debating this. Should previous governments have done something similar? Were we too soft? As Pakistan has continued to bleed India repeatedly through terror attacks and through its support of non-state actors, as they call them, others would say they're very much state actors, maybe India should have reacted really forcefully earlier. But now that we've done this, the game has changed, the goalposts have changed, and we seem to be still getting a lot of foreign support from other countries. But what would you do next right now? Would you escalate further? Another strike? Raise the temperatures? Would you de-escalate now, wait and watch a little bit? Would you think about other steps like economic sanctions to really hurt Pakistan where it's most vulnerable? What would you do?
Well, certainly on the diplomatic front and on the non-military front, obviously we cannot let our guard down, and there is a lot that has still to be done to isolate Pakistan, because the world recognizes the absolute reality of terror groups operating from Pakistani soil. I don't believe, we are any more like Cassandra's, the Greek story, where Cassandra was never believed for what she said. I think that phase is over. Everybody believes us. But to what extent are we able to achieve those goals of finally seeing these terror groups proscribed forever, their leaders put away, their activities put to an end? Now you have the whole mentioning the listing of Masood Azhar in the UN Security Council's sanctions list, and that is going to come up again for consideration on the 13th of March, I believe. So the front certainly has to move in that direction now. Okay. How are we going to get our friends, our partners, our well-wishers together to ensure that one reluctant member of the Security Council, China, is going to play ball and agree to the proscription and the listing of Masood Azhar?
And also what
you saw the interview that the foreign minister of Pakistan, excuse me?
Yes, ma'am. I was just about to say also whatever leverage we have. Whatever leverage we have with China to make sure that China doesn't stop it. In a sense, you're right. You were about to refer to the interview which the foreign minister of Pakistan gave. He was more or less admitting and confessing, if a confession was really required, that Jaish-e-Mohammed chief is there. He was being treated in a Pakistani army hospital, so people are in touch with him. So there's no doubt anymore that the Jaish-e-Mohammed is there, that Masood Azhar is there, and the Pakistanis know
you know, call it a Freudian slip or whatever you would like to. I think that the body language and the words of Foreign Minister Qureshi gave Pakistan away completely. I think it's obvious that they are shielding Masood Azhar. They provide him nurture, they give him patronage. What more proof do you want? And I think we will have to really hone, I believe also, our communication strategy, because in the last week, so much of a fog has descended on the whole arena of action, as it were, between the two countries. The Pakistanis, of course, have gone to town. They've been talking, they've been, you know, gearing up their public diplomacy. And I think we need to oil the wheels better on our side also. As far as putting our case out there, it's not just enough for the governments of various countries to subscribe to our position, but we also need the media, we need the big spokesmen of public opinion across the world to support our case on this. It's still a campaign that we have to fight and win.
All right, ma'am. I think that's very good. That's very good advice. That, for example, what exactly happened at Balakot, what was struck, what was not struck, what happened with the F-16s. All of these are, yes, of course, everyone in India is going to accept and believe what the government is saying. But you're right; it needs to be communicated all across the world so everyone understands what the position is. Nirupama Rao, thank you so much for joining us, ma'am, with some of that perspective. Thank you so much for having been with us. It was a pleasure talking to you. All right, I'm just going to throw it open to all of you, and if I could just list some of the options that, when we are sort of scribbling it down and saying what could be the possible options right now, just to start the discussion. I'm going to table some of them and let me see which of them you agree with and which are the paths that others would take. So here are just some of the possible options for India right now. At this point, after everything that's happened the week, Wing Commander Abhinandan is back, but we're still not satisfied, obviously, that Pakistan is going to do anything further to actually rein in the terror groups who are at the root of this entire problem. So India has further options. Well, option one, of course, is further military action. Say this is not satisfactory. If you're not doing anything about actually shutting down those military camps, there will be a further military action. Now, the pros of this, well, many. You're teaching Pakistan a lesson, satisfying public opinion, politically attractive. But the cons are, at this point, is it going to be losing international support, which has been by and large with India, and there is obviously the risk of escalation. So that's those are some of the factors to be kept in mind when you're looking at further military action. Option number two is resume dialogue, and resume dialogue already at this stage. I think we need to move on the graphics on that. So resume dialogues on there. Advantage of that is, if Pakistan's trying to pose itself as a peacemaker at this point, with whatever Imran Khan has done, but say, well, no, India also wants peace. We're willing to think of dialogue. This, many people will feel, is not actually the right thing to do right now, for the simple reason you're still not addressing the core concerns, issues like terror, and of course politically it could well be very counterproductive right now, not addressing India's core concern. Third option, wait and watch, just give it some time. Let's see what exactly it is that Pakistan does, continue to mount a certain amount of pressure, try and see if look at the proscribing of Masood Azhar, do steps like that. Wait and see if Pakistan's actually going to do something right now. But the con of this is it going to be a bit of a drift? Are you going to end up losing the momentum by just waiting and watch? Will it seem like we've gone back to business as usual? So that's one of the issues around there. Just going to table one more option, then I'm going to come to, I promise I'm going to be quiet and allow all of you to weigh in on this. The option number 4 would be something again different, something which India has not done before, something like economic sanctions, for example, or working towards how you can get economic sanctions done. Pro of that obviously is that it hits Pakistan where it's the weakest. It's the weakest particular area for Pakistan. Try and find a way in which you can get the international community to come in on this. But how it will be done, how it will work is obviously something to be thought of. What would be the nature and the means for this? Well, just some of the options. I'm sure all of you have far better ideas than this. So why don't I start with you, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Vikram Chandra. I really approach this in a somewhat different manner, so I won't go by your options, but I would like to present an approach that we need to take with Pakistan, because since 47, they have bled us through terrorism. We have been different governments have adopted different policies, mostly very accommodative policies, and the policies have not been sustained over time. So what is Pakistan all about? And I would put to you, I've lived in Pakistan for 6 years, I've dealt with it for more than 6 years bilaterally, directly, and elsewhere also. My own assessment is that the internal dynamics of Pakistan, which includes its tremendous identity crisis, is such that they are in an inimical mode vis-a-vis India, no matter what you do. Even if you were to concede on their demands, the core demand of Kashmir, and Musharraf said as much, if you recall, in Karachi in April 1999, that even if Kashmir is resolved, we will continue to have problems. So you are...
He did go back on that a little later, I think. And can I just ask you, has there been a change at all in Pakistan? But the position you're describing was absolutely correct up to a certain point. But there are some who feel that by now the realization is starting to dawn, even in Pakistan, that these 40 to 50 years of unending hostility and the desire to bleed India, I mean the hostility goes back a long way, but this entire thing that, oh, we're going to bleed India through low-cost methods and through proxies and the rest of it, no one has got damaged more than Pakistan. If you consider what Pakistan was and where it was vis-a-vis India in the 70s compared to what the position is right now, India has risen, Pakistan has slid, and as a result, it's hurt nobody more than it's hurt Pakistan itself. Is that a realization that's dawning?
No, unfortunately not. And I'll relate to you personal conversations I've had with people when I was in Pakistan. And when I told them exactly what you said, they said it really doesn't matter as long as we bring you down. And seeing some of the statements made by politicians no longer in power in Pakistan today, you get the same message. In fact, when I told my immediate boss at the time of the Agra summit suggesting against it, I was told, you know, things have changed. I told them, I disagree with you, sir.
So no matter how much they are going to bleed, they would still want hostility because they would rather hurt India.
Exactly.
They hate India more than they love their own country. Which, by the way, sometimes something which people say is not a trap that we should ever get into.
No, we shouldn't. But what I'm saying is this is the reality, and you've been bled. Now, so my suggestion on this, and that's where I come to your specific options, is that you really need to adopt a policy which will have to be consistent, not months but years even, designed to impose costs on Pakistan for the pain they have inflicted. Now, how you impose the cost, I'll come to that.
Okay.
But imposition of costs, and this, by the way, was a paper developed by a lot of strategic thinkers in India, in Delhi, about 60 of us, and we had a press conference on it in 2013. So the idea is a policy designed to impose costs. This is a whole of government policy. The military option, and this is which will interest you since you asked, is an element, but a rather smaller element of this.
Okay. Impose costs on Pakistan, and the military aspect of it is a relatively smaller part of it.
And what, again, I would suggest, and this is something that we need to work out, that I can tell you from what colleagues of Mr. Dulat, who is here, when we were both in the system at the same time, fed into the National Security Council Secretariat, was that there are any number of sleeper cells all over India from our friendly neighbor in the West. And therefore, I do not rule out terrorist actions against us anytime, anywhere. And therefore, we need to be prepared of what we will do for X, Y, Z. You have 10 options, you press your button, there should be automaticity on the response.
Okay.
That has
so
to come.
A system of imposing costs, be prepared, unfortunately, for the possibility of further terror attacks, and have a range of costs. And the military costs are not the only costs. Mr. Dulat,
just 1 second, just to complete this thought. There is the diplomatic options, which must constantly be in play.
Which have been relatively successful so far.
The economic aspects, on that there is the Indus Waters Treaty. We can legally today walk out of the treaty. So there are many, many ways of imposing costs. I could go on all evening, but
Okay,
then
I'm going to get you to go on a little later on that. After I just turn to Mr. Dulat and ask him. So, and I'm going to then come to all the gentlemen who can maybe help us with some of the military options. I mean, you heard what he said. That Pakistan is not going to change is one of the more worrying aspects of what he said. Whatever may be said by Imran Khan or anybody else, at the end of the day, there is a fundamental hostility that is not going to change. So you just have to have the ability to impose costs. Now, we know one of the costs, right, which is military strikes, and that's something which is often spoken about. The problem in military strikes, I guess, Mr. Dulat, is that there's a limit to what can you impose unacceptable military costs to Pakistan. There's always a risk of then hitting so you can have certain attacks on terrorist camps, but if you start imposing unacceptable military costs to Pakistan, that's when the nuclear spectre starts to hang. So are there unacceptable costs then elsewhere? Covert action, other actions within Pakistan is one option. The economic aspects of it, because you can impose fairly high economic costs on Pakistan, right. And that's where they are perhaps even more vulnerable. What would be your take, sir?
Well, to react to what Satish has just said, he's an old friend. We worked for the government, for the same establishment at the same time. I agree with him entirely that, we have not been consistent. But I think he looks at it slightly differently from the way I look at it. Because, let me start by saying that every Prime Minister, because we have this problem next door, and there is no denying that the factory of terror exists in Pakistan. Maybe it's not as big as it was 15 years ago, but it's still very much there. But therefore, different Prime Ministers have been tested at different times in the last 30 years. And Prime Minister Vajpayee, I think, was tested more than anybody else. But he was quite clear in his mind, and I think when Satish talks about the Agra summit, the Agra summit happened soon after Kargil. And it didn't deter Vajpayee from his basic belief that this permanent confrontation with Pakistan has to end. Must end. That was one of his...
But it can't be done unilaterally. Again, as we learned in Agra, that we can't unilaterally say, okay, we want peace with Pakistan, and Pakistan wants it also.
No. Of course it can't be done unilaterally. But that's where I agree with Satish that we've not been consistent. We've talked sometime, we haven't talked sometime. There is a dialogue off, on, off. It's been like that. And during that period of Vajpayee to Dr. Manmohan Singh, that was the period during which we had the maximum peace in Kashmir. And that was the period when terrorism came down considerably. Of course, I must admit that 9/11 also contributed to that. That was a watershed, and indirectly it helped us.
All right.
But it was also because of the fact that we were moving forward with Pakistan. And I don't agree that there is no change in Pakistan. I think there is a noticeable change in Pakistan, and the change came with Musharraf, surprisingly. If you look at Pakistani leaders in the last 30 years, I don't think anybody has been more reasonable than Musharraf was. And that is why Dr. Manmohan Singh, while demitting office, said that we almost reached an agreement. And
almost is not good enough, though.
Almost is not good enough. That's right. That's where consistency is important. And let me add that if that agreement had been reached, we would possibly have had 15 years of peace in Kashmir. What was Musharraf agreeing to? Musharraf was agreeing to almost everything that we wanted. He was agreeing to an agreement on the line of control, plus some cosmetics. That was his 4-point formula. And that is what, for the last 30 years, Dr. Farooq Abdullah has been saying, that there is no other solution to Kashmir.
No, so are you saying that, so I'm just asking, can India press enough levers at the present moment? Yes, there was a potential agreement on the table, right, which was there. As I'm saying, it's not, almost is not good enough. We didn't sign it. It was 10 years ago. If we had signed it, maybe things would have been very different 10 to 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Can that be revived right now, or is that now, spilt milk? It's too bad. Water under the bridge. It can't be revived at this stage.
I think if we were to start again, that's a good starting point. Whether it can be revived or not is difficult to say, because now even Musharraf is persona non grata in Pakistan.
Yeah.
But we again, to my way of thinking, I may be absolutely wrong, I think we again have a Prime Minister in Pakistan who is appearing to be reasonable, much more reasonable than we thought he was.
Okay.
And also we say that he's a stooge of the Pakistan army. He's a creation of the Pakistan army. Let me just finish this. I say Imran has always been his own man, as a cricketer, as a person, whatever it is. And if he has a good equation, or if the army is on the same page as he is, and I think that showed out again now in the release of our wing commander, he had to have the armies okay. So I think that again is a positive thing. This is a good time to talk. Whether we want to talk now or after the elections or never, well, that's up to government.
Okay, so if I can just get the others in on this, let me just get some of the people with some, from a military point of view also. So, Air Marshal Anil Chopra, we've been hearing, a lot being said on some of the possible ways that you can talk or you can lean on Pakistan in non-military ways. Air Marshal Chopra, there are others who would say, well, this is not the time to do any of this, not the time to talk, it's not the time to be reasonable. You should teach Pakistan a military lesson. And you're hearing this being increasingly and more stridently said this week. It's said every time there's been a terror attack, but it's particularly an acute feeling right now, or so it appears. What would be your take on it?
I must tell you, Vikram, that in the last 3 weeks, Pakistan has shot itself in its foot a couple of times, whereas India has raised the level of options that India wants to exercise today. You see, within 2 hours of the Pulwama attack, the Jaish-e-Mohammed leadership sitting in Pakistan announced that they had done it. So they shot themselves in the foot. Very next morning, the Prime Minister of India says it will be avenged. And then he says, I am giving free hand to the armed forces to choose the place and time of their choosing. So, first step of our options being said. 12 days later, after we have just inaugurated the National War Museum, everybody is, the military establishment is seen at such a point. Early next morning, we do a 12 aircraft deep strike.
We know what happens, sir. If I could just ask you.
And we,
we know what happened and we know the sequence of events. I'm just saying, looking ahead. Do you think military is the answer or something else?
Yes. The point I'm taking is that for the first time, we have shown our intent to hit back deep into Pakistan. That means we have raised the level of military option. We have also conveyed to Pakistan that the bogey of nuclear weapons and nuclear overhang will not carry on any further. Now, where do we go from here? There has to be a multi-pronged pressure on them. Militarily, the pressure has to continue. The armed forces have to remain in place. The Air Force has to continue to do air patrols. The army has to keep responding heavily, disproportionately heavily to the shelling that the Pakistani is doing. Similarly, I would say that even the Navy has to start showing some movements. The idea is that the Pakistani armed forces have to be kept head down and under pressure. That is going to cost them economically and otherwise also.
All right, so keep the military pressure on.
The fissures within Pakistan, fissures within Pakistan have to be exploited by using other covert means. We have to use to exploit the fissures within Pakistan and put a greater pressure.
All right, Air Marshal Chopra, we heard you. I'm just going to try and get somebody else in.
They have never good change.
Okay, I'm just going to try and get some other in. Commander Bhaskar, You saw some of the options out there. Obviously, one of the ways to look at it is try all the options, put all the pressure, maximize pressure, and keep that pressure on. Do not relent. Don't necessarily start dialogue right now. Keep on the pressure until the terror machinery is
if I
actually
could
shut
just
down.
pick up some of the points made by the others. Clearly, I think the military option is not the only option, and that's a motherhood and apple pie kind of point which everyone agrees upon. In terms of the multi-pronged...
Not everyone. It's actually, these days, it's increasingly popular to say, forget all the other stuff, just go for the military option, ek baar khatam kar do. Actually, it's not the first time. This happens every time there's been a terror attack. We've been having these debates where a lot of people feel that it's time now, have one war, finish it all off, and those
Let me
sentiments
say this
keep getting
tongue in
whipped up.
cheek, maybe on this particular channel, we have an objective panel. So, we are giving you the, what I would call as, that to deal with this particular issue, I think any logic normatively would say that the military cannot be the only option, and I think Mr. Dulat and Ambassador Chandra have identified. My limited sort of observation is that at this point in time, we have to look at this in a wide spectrum manner and have the ability to pursue different tracks. Meaning the military is one track, there is an international track, and there is also a domestic track. So my reading is that we are talking about the equivalent of the Pulwama Balakot trajectory. It goes beyond Wing Commander Abhinandan, it goes beyond the CRPF, and it's a tragedy. But what India has to do, I think, is to do a reality check about what are our objectives. Now, we spoke about the consistency part. What has Prime Minister Modi brought to the table as the Prime Minister? What are his objectives? And what is our capability check? Because I often get a bit concerned, many of the so-called objectives that are now being said in the public domain, the dominant stream, I think do not relate to the capability we have. So that's the first point. And on Pulwama, while the CRPF tragedy is still with us and the families are, there's a human dimension, we can't de-link the Kashmir part, Vikram. That attack took place because of a young man from Kashmir. So when we say multiple tracks, I think we need to also look back saying that what are we doing on this issue, and
So
not
don't
see
have your
this
head
only
under,
as...
don't have your head in the sand, recognize that there are internal things that also need to be looked at.
and
We
have
need
the
to set our
integrity
internal
to
house
come
in
up with a
order.
national objective. Do not get carried away by the electoral cycle or the political compulsion, which has often happened in relation to Kashmir. So I think that's my point. Have that integrity to identify the national objective, which should not become a handmaiden of the electoral compulsion, which alas we are seeing, I would say quite visibly.
My own guess would be that any internal aspects of this will only be looked at after the elections, but that's just a guess. I'm not sure whether that's right.
Well,
or
that's
wrong.
undesirable, if I may say so, on your channel.
But that's just a guess. But if I could just ask you, we are talking about breaking from the past and trying to do some things that are different. And Balakot obviously was a break from the past and the willingness to do something different. One of the questions that has come up, and I'm just coming back to the diplomatic aspects of the pressure that we were just talking about, one of the aspects is India has always said there is no question of international mediation. It's been an article of faith. Bilateral is all that has to happen. We should not have international mediation. Is it time to start thinking about changing that? Because let's face it, Pakistan's never been more isolated than it has. The reluctance to have international mediation was grounded in the experiences of the 50s and 60s, where India was more isolated.
Right.
Time to change that?
Yeah, I'll just get that in a minute, but just to tag on to what Comrade Bhaskar was saying, the fact that there is an internal situation vis-a-vis Kashmir and there are cleavages within Indian public opinion on that issue is something that the Pakistani establishment also capitalizes on. So I think in order to tackle Pakistan, it would be in India's interest to also address the internal. That's a separate story. On the question of isolation, well, I've argued actually today that isolation and mediation are in a sense two sides of the same coin, because the language of isolation that was brought in so forcefully post Uri actually meant that India was out on the world stage lobbying with the world community to isolate Pakistan. To what end were you doing that? You were doing it in order to get the world community to weigh in on Pakistan. And it's very well for us to say that it's against every tenet of Indian foreign policy that has been practiced so far. But I think the last 72 hours or the last week that we have seen, the de-escalation is a result of that international mediation. The return of Wing Commander Abhinandan is a result of international mediation.
End your reluctance to that.
Yeah. Not just end your reluctance.
Do you agree with that? Is it time for us to start? Is that one of the areas we should try and change?
Look, we have always, very often, not always, invoked international opinion to weigh in on our support. Kargil was another case in point where the Americans did pressurize the Pakistanis. In a reverse situation, when we were being pressurized on human rights, and I was addressing it in Geneva, we did a very heavy lobbying effort in which we did succeed. So, look, international opinion is something you have to play on.
Also,
but can you call it mediation
no,
or not
mediation? It's actually not mediation. You see what's happened.
It's the language, right?
No, Maya, much more than that. What has changed, and that's why we have to change also, that India's heft on the international stage has increased.
Yeah, but Vikram, can I just make one final point?
So therefore your leverage is also more.
Exactly.
The fact of the matter is the Pulwama terror attack, as ghastly as it was, as horrific and brutal and tragic as it was, did not get the world to sit up and take notice to what was going on and India's concerns. But the launch of these airstrikes, the fact that India has pushed the red line and sort of thrown strategic restraint out of the window, got the world's attention. And is that not mediation? Or is that not going to lead to some kind of mediation?
The shifting, let me just come back to the point, sir, on the shifting of the red lines. What else is going to be shifted? Because to one extent, and we've often had this debate, and Sundar, I'm going to come back to you on that also, we've often had this debate and discussion in studios like this, that one of the first things that India has to have the ability to do is also have a direct cost to the terrorists, and their leadership. They should start living in terror. Why should ordinary citizens be living in terror? It's time for the terrorists to live in terror and not be sure when an Indian missile could come in and hit them. Is that one of the things that you think is an area we should push towards?
I'll just come on to this exact question you asked. But you posed 4 options. I would say that there are not 4 different options. There are 3 options. Wait and watch is at present not an option at all. And there are 3 options. These 3 options have to go simultaneously. I mean, we should not have any hesitation in going simultaneously on these options, because we find that firstly Pakistan is in a corner. All of us agree to that. They are in a corner, and now you want to retract at this point of stage. I think that will be an option which I would definitely not recommend. All 3 options should go simultaneously.
No, so all 3 options meaning you're saying continue the threat or the possibility of military action, have economic sanctions, but also have dialogue. Is that what you're saying?
Dialogue is a part of this whole option, but not dialogue in the terms which they are saying today. He's saying let's have dialogue on what? What is the agenda for the dialogue? Is there terror on the dialogue, or he wants to have dialogue on his own terms? I mean, we have to be very clear on this thing and not get carried away by this, what he says on the television and this thing. Somehow we tend to get carried away by this. What is the point of dialogue he wants to have? Is he going to have dialogue over what terrorist factories which he's having? Yes, if he wants to have dialogue and how to go about it. Does he want to have dialogue over Mumbai 2611, how he's going to handle it? Let's go ahead with the dialogue. But we don't want to go ahead with the dialogue. He is pushed to the corner. That is one part I'm saying, that we should go all out till we achieve the strategic objective. That is and second aspect, from military option, I'd just like to elaborate. We tend to think that military option is just from the airstrikes, you're going to go into some nuclear mode or something. No. You see, military, you can use airstrikes first and use the land the strategy first. It's a very flexible options which are there.
But with a country as unstable as Pakistan, there is always that concern with any military action, and let me just throw that to you, Major General Jamwal. Is there still that big concern that no one quite knows what the escalatory ladder is? I mean, by the way, this time India confounded the rest of the world. Nobody thought India is going to go ahead with airstrikes, and that also not in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, but all the way in Balkot. So, what is the escalatory ladder? Do we have a clearer idea on that or not yet?
Well, Vikram, I feel a lot of these options which have been spoken out over the last few days, 17, 18 days, a lot of these have been discussed also on various forums. There is one important issue which Commander Bhaskar also raised, is looking inwards. That's a very important, I think that's option number 1. We have to look inward, we have to look at our preparedness. You can keep jotting down all kinds of options, but looking inwards by mean in 2 words. Number 1, militancy cannot succeed anywhere in the world unless there is local support. So this has to be snapped. What action have we taken? It is not snapped. If there was no military support, there was no Pulwama, there were no other attacks in the country. Most of them could have been reduced. That is one.
So what's the way to do that? Because on most TV channels it says find the traitors, hunt them out.
Whatever. Those actions we can deliberate. The second thing is the intelligence network. It's a very important point. Without this aspect, how can you proceed? First, to set your house in order. I feel against anti-national elements, there has got to be a very strong ordinance by the government of India. Point number one. Point number two, I'll come on preparedness. We can keep saying military option. Military option is not a very, easy thing. There are two nuclear nations who are in a standoff.
Right.
Warring nations. So, I remember in 1999 during the Kargil, General Malik, the then chief, was asked a question, and to the response to that question was, we will do our best as per what is available to us.
Right.
So that's a huge message to the country. See, I've been involved in perspective planning, financial planning of the armed forces for good 7-8 years. 20 years down the line, I can assure you, whether it is the inventory, whether it is the budgeting, whether it is the equipment getting obsolete, nothing much has changed.
Okay, and that's
the armed forces. The armed forces. Just a while. Just a while. We are at almost 60 to 70%. Right. Number two. Tomorrow, if we raise the level, escalation, as you are saying, and the China factor also comes in, I think we are in a very, very tough situation. So we have to be pragmatic.
Okay.
Two-finger Vikram, if I may, just to pick up Jamal's point, in the Pulwama Balakot trajectory, as I said, India fielded a MiG-21, 1960s vintage. The aircraft on the other side is almost 2 generations removed. That's one illustration.
But we did have 250 Sukhoi 30s and multiple
I'm saying when you talk about all your
options,
I'll just finish it. Just look at General Khanduri's report. This was submitted to Parliament. Standing Committee on Defence headed by a general, former Chief Minister of a BJP-led state, says that you have many gaps. I'm only saying do a reality check. Your capacities, in which intelligence is an integral part, as also what is a feasible objective. That's all I'm saying.
No, the point is very clear. Military option, we are not going to go for an all-out war. Let's be very clear. And we have sufficient amount of capability at present to put Pakistan under pressure. Okay. We have done it in Parakram. He was very much under pressure. We can do it now.
And by the way, putting Pakistan under military pressure may also just mean making them spend a lot of money which they can ill afford.
Take on something which you asked and wasn't addressed, is the nuclear factor. Now, this is a game that Pakistan has played always, nuclear blackmail. I think we've got taken in, a lot of people in India have. And here I would like to emphasize that, remember, if they have nuclear weapons, so have we. And should they do a nuclear attack, there would be an incineration on the other side.
In fact, we have.
We shouldn't get overly scared about that. That is a problem.
The reason why people get concerned about that is that if you're confronted, for example, with a suicide bomber, I'm not saying that it's an exact analogy, but if you're confronted with a suicide bomber in a room, sometimes, you have to be a little, yes, both of you will get blown up, but
that's where the escalating ladder is. I mean, that's why
it cannot happen overnight. Exploit the desperation of Pakistan in seeking engagement with India. This is a very important point.
Okay, I'm just going to come to that, but Mr. Dulat, if I can just come to you on one of the other things that we haven't really spoken about was the ability for India. I think it was Air Marshal Chopra who was referring to it. Figure out the cleavages within Pakistan, find the weaknesses out there, take steps inside there. And one of the things that I think we've often discussed in shows, nothing has ever happened with that. Why is it that we don't have the capability to directly target the terror groups inside Pakistan? I'm sure there should be ways of doing it. I mean, we heard today from the Pakistani foreign minister of how Masood Azhar is in some hospital, unwell, being taken care of. I'm sure there are many Indians who are wondering why we can't take care of some of the terrorists in a slightly different manner.
Let me put it like this. This is not a subject that can be discussed openly on television. But
we've been beating around the bush trying to not discuss this on television for 14 years, and I'm surprised that we've never done anything about it.
Let me explain it to the extent that I can, that this has, ultimately there is a political call in this. And the political thinking has varied from time to time. I agree with you that at this point of time, under the present dispensation, there should be no problem in going ahead and doing something on the lines that you are suggesting. But this is a game that can carry on indefinitely. And for obvious reasons, if this is the ultimate game, then Pakistan will always have an advantage over us.
So they have more ability to, if you want to play the game of covert action and others, you think Pakistan may. Air Marshal Chopra, I just want to quickly get you, and I'm about to wrap this program. Let me get final thoughts from everybody. Air Marshal Chopra, any final thoughts you have, including on some of the questions of capability? We've been seeing this entire debate about that MiG-21 and the fact it was able to shoot down an F-16. Your take on capabilities right now?
You know, firstly, I must tell you that this escalation dynamics and this nuclear overhang, I think we are overrating it. We are overrating it because in the last 2 years, first we did a surgical strike on the ground and nothing happened. Now we have done an air strike deep inside beyond POK. Nothing is happening. Nothing is going to happen in a hurry. Nobody is so foolish. Since 1945, nobody has dropped the nuclear bomb. So I think we are overreacting on this. The second part is, surely the Indian Air Force, today the modernization has got affected. We are down to 30 fighter squadrons and we have still in today's time having to field MiG-21. Though I am proud that a MiG-21 upgraded variant which had a good missile, good radar, was able to shoot an F-16. Though in that region were Su-30s and Mirage 2000s also, but so maybe that he was better positioned to take on this shot. Undoubtedly, the defense budget, the capital budgets have to go up. Our military capability has to go up, not only against Pakistan, because we have to look at a two-front war. So therefore, I think one lesson that comes out from this, as some panelists have already said, that in today's time we should not be having MiG-21s, but should have more modern aircraft, and therefore I think defense budgeting has to go up.
All right, sir. I'm just going to throw one final possibility, an option which I briefly referred to, we haven't discussed it yet, was the economic aspect, to try and hit Pakistan where it's the most vulnerable. Now, people are saying, how could it be done? There are lots of ways it could be done. India could pass an anti-terror law. We should ideally try and get the rest of the international community to do it. FATF has still grey-listed Pakistan, not blacklisted them. Maybe that could happen. But India could have an anti-terror law. It could say that anybody who is doing business in Pakistan, when you are here doing business in India also, you have to realize we have to be very careful that you are not in any way assisting terror. So there are certain aspects that have to be done with that. Get other countries to come into line, have some of those, maybe India is not strong enough to impose economic sanctions by itself the way the United States can often do with Iran and others, but maybe start pressing Pakistan on some of these areas.
Chandras don't disagree. And I agree with you. In fact, that is a part of the composite plan that we had developed.
Economic pressure on Pakistan.
The economic pressure and declare, pass an act of parliament. In fact, there was a bill.
That can be done. Sorry. That can be done immediately, because you just tell Saudi Arabia and UAE to stop this whole shift of money to them. Pakistan will be on his knees within 48 hours.
No, you can do that. I am going on your ordinance or act of parliament. There was
a bill. We can have an ordinance tomorrow which can come in. Next week have an ordinance which says this, which says, for example, any company which is doing business in POK, you will have to explain why exactly are you doing it. Are you investing fresh investments in Pakistan? I'm not saying you can't, India should say that we can't say that you can't do it, but you just have to, there is a anti-terror law in India, you've got to be careful about that. It starts to impose serious economic costs in Pakistan.
It also adds heft to your diplomatic effort for other countries to act against Pakistan.
Commander Bhaskar is shaking his head.
Vikram, just give me 2 minutes.
He wants to disagree, sir. I have to give a chance to disagree.
I would just make a case in the limited time. This is wishful thinking, because India's bilateral engagement with Pakistan economically is very, very limited.
But it's not. But one second. But I think what the two Chandras saying, not the bilateral engagement, but third parties.
I'm saying the idea that Saudi Arabia and UAE will come on board and bring it to its knees because we want them to is wishful thinking.
This is not a Chandra
We might paint ourselves into a corner. You think that other corporates in the world will say that because India has an anti-terror law, you trade with Pakistan, we won't give you options in India, we might be painting ourselves into a corner. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Are we painting into a corner? Mr. Dulat, I have to end the show. I'm going to get you to respond on this particular debate.
Vikram, just give me 35 seconds. Just 35 seconds.
10 seconds.
Okay, 10 seconds. This is in deference to Mr. Dulat because we are such old friends, it goes back to our parents. Number one, remember, you said these were peaceful years. There was 26/11 that happened.
Sir,
the Musharraf plan, quite honestly, was not a very good plan. And just one last, Imran Khan, after what he did to Abhinandan and the tortures that were inflicted, I don't think is a good plan.
I don't have time for you. I'm just going to get one line, sir, from you on whether this economic plan is feasible or not.
No, I am all for the economic plan if it can get Pakistan down to its knees, as somebody suggested. But you know, coming back to the internal situation,
okay,
I think we are forgetting Kashmir, and I haven't mentioned this all this while. But you know, if Pakistan is back there today, and if terror is the only narrative in Kashmir, it is because of the fact that we have tried to deal with it only as a military or a law and order problem, which Kashmir is not, and Kashmir will never get resolved, nor will our problems with Pakistan end if you treat it only as a military problem.
All right, so I'm going to use that as the last word on this show because I'm being told we are flat out of time. Thank you so much for joining us with a range of options and a range of really interesting thoughts that I'm sure the policymakers are going to keep in mind. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye.